This is Straight Talk with Atlanta native Greg Fann, the Preacher Man, and his sidekick Shanan Jones. Frank discussions of issues affecting the ATL, Fulton County, the state of Georgia, the nation, and around the world. And now, here they are, live and in living color, the team of Jones and Fann, the Preacher.
Well, this is Greg Fann, the Preacher Man, here in my office here at the church. And thank you so much for joining us today on Straight Talk. The George to the Greg Fann, the Preacher Man, and Shanan E. Jones. And Shanan will be with us a little bit. He's on the construction site. They're doing a little work there. You'll hear a little noise in the background. But he'll be joining us a little later on in the program today. And pardon me for sinuses are bothering me. And you know, it's that time of the year. It's sinus weather time. Well, today we're going to do a special tribute to one of the legends of our time here in the city of Atlanta, the Reverend R. L. White Jr. Reverend White was the founder and the pastor of the Mount Ephraim Baptist Church here in the city of Atlanta. And he also served as the president of the Atlanta chapter of the NACP. We'll be showing an excerpt with an interview of Reverend White as he was the president of the Atlanta chapter of the NACP on the program today, so you can hear a little bit about that. And when Shanan and I talk a little bit more about Reverend White and the work that Reverend White has done, recording records, preaching, evangelizing all over this country, preaching the word of Jesus Christ. Well, we'll be back in a little bit with Black History Facts about the late Congressman John Lewis. And many of you know about John Lewis serving in civil rights and the work that he did for voters' rights. But we're going to be telling you a little bit more about him in our Black History Fact. Don't you know where you stay there today, because Miss C won't be with us. She's taking a sabbatical. She'll be back next week. We'll see you on the other side.
The Preacher Man, right here on Straight Talk with Black History Facts with Brother James Broom.
In recognition of Black History Month, Straight Talk will be honoring a man who was arrested over 40 times, was considered one of the big six of the civil rights movement, and was the youngest speaker at the 1963 March on Washington. That man, the Honorable John Lewis. John Robert Lewis was born near Troy, Alabama on February 21st, 1940. He was the third of 10 children born to Eddie and Willie Mae Lewis, who grew to become a civil rights activist and icon and a renowned politician. He was a member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, otherwise known as SNCC, and from 1963 to 1966 was its chairman. While at SNCC, John Lewis became one of the original 13 Freedom Riders. Now, they were a group of black and white students who rode on interstate buses in order to pressure the federal government to enforce the Supreme Court decision of 1960, which declared that segregated interstate bus travel was unconstitutional. John Lewis was considered one of the Big Six. That included Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, A. Philip Randolph of the AFL-CIO, Roy Wilkins of the NAACP, Whitney Young of the National Urban League, James Farmer of CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality, and John Lewis of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. These men and their organizations were responsible for organizing the 1963 March on Washington, to which John Lewis was the youngest speaker. John Lewis himself fulfilled many key roles in the civil rights movement, like in 1965 when he led the first march from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama, which included having to cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge, which resulted in John Lewis and many of the other marchers being attacked by Alabama police and state troopers. This incident became known as Bloody Sunday. John Lewis was first elected to Congress in 1986 and served in the United States House of Representatives, and in 2003 became Senior Chief Deputy Whip. During his lifetime, John Lewis received many honorary degrees and awards, the most distinguished of which was the Presidential Medal of Freedom, given by then-President Barack Obama in 2011. John Lewis personally boycotted or protested the war in Iraq, the genocide in Darfur, and advocated for immigration reform. It was John Lewis who was pivotal in the establishment of the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. John Lewis died July 17, 2020, of pancreatic cancer. He was 80 years old. And in his honor, on July 26th, his casket was horse-drawn across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And on July 27th and 28th, John Lewis would lie in state under the Capitol Rotunda, becoming the first African-American lawmaker to be so honored. That's John Lewis, a renowned civil rights leader and voting rights advocate, a U.S. congressman, and a great humanitarian who made a difference.
Thank you, Brother Broom, for your Black History facts on the late Congressman John Lewis. I want to just interject some things, and Shanan and I'll talk a little bit more about it when Shanan comes out of the construction site. Well, we're going to talk. Listen, we just funeralized this week Bunny Jackson Ransom, the former wife of the late Maynard Jackson. Bunny was a pillar in our community, a great person, great spirit, beloved by many, many people here, not only in Atlanta, but around this country. We've just lost Thomas Deutsch, 100 black men, an entrepreneur, 72 years old, a pillar in this community. We've lost the late football player, the legend Jim Brown, going on to glory. And there are others that God has called home. Brother Samuels, very involved in the SALC along with his wife, Rita Samuels, gone on to glory. God is calling us home one by one. I talked this week with the Reverend Gerald Durley, Dr. Reverend Gerald Durley, who did the eulogy for Bunny Jackson Ransom. And we talked about a lot of things. And when we see people like Reverend Durley and others who have been here a while and who have fought the good fight and have stood up for justice and equality, and yet proclaiming the word of God and telling men and women that to keep the faith because God is faithful to the faithful. Let us continue to stay faithful to God, and let us continue to preach Jesus Christ, him lived, died, resurrected, and coming back again, and the message of love and respect. And we'll be back at the Reverend White interview on the other side. A preacher's preacher, an evangelist, a gifted singer, the Reverend R.L. White Jr.
Good, and welcome to the Herbert Denard Show. We're shooting on location. We have with us Dr. R.L. White Jr. Welcome.
Thank you, and I'm glad to be here with you.
You now a president of the NAACP. We are aware that you have been recording music for a long, long time. A lot of albums. How many albums?
You know, I stopped counting. I think we must have about 18 or 20 out by now.
Gospel album, top-selling albums. Who are some of the people you have recorded with?
Well, we've had Joe Ligon of the Mighty Clouds of Joy. He's recorded with us. The Williams Brothers, Donald Vales. We've had several different national groups record with us.
Okay, but now you're president of the Atlanta chapter of the NAACP. How long have you been president?
I've been president of the Atlanta NAACP ever since 1997, and it's been quite a ride.
That's quite interesting. How do you go from your pastor of a very, very large church in Atlanta, Mount Ephraim, and you recording artist? How do you find the time to then and now concentrate on being president of the NAACP in the city of Atlanta?
Well, one of the things that we do have in Atlanta is an executive director who handles the day-to-day movement of the NAACP. I'm the public spokesman for them. I'm the one that says yay, yay, nay, nay, so they can call me wherever I am and we can direct them. I'm the one who does the public statements. So I've got a good staff, both at the church and at the NAACP. And you know, when you've got staff and they know their jobs, it's not hard for you to do what you need to do.
But the NAACP president is not a paid position. The executive director of the NAACP is a paid position. Is that correct?
That's right. The presidency is not paid, and the executive director is a full-time paid position. Plus, we have a full-time administrative assistant to the executive secretary.
Tell us some of the things that the NAACP has been involved in the city of Atlanta.
Well, now, and we are involved in what's going to be nationally, you're going to hear more about. There is a lawsuit, a class action suit against the predatory lending across this country, and we are certainly involved in that. We've been involved in last year with the Janalo Wilson case where he's now a free man and in school. Just in the last year, I had a young man who was expelled from Georgia State. What I saw was unfairly, because he had already gone 4 years. He was within 3 weeks of graduation, and they expelled him. When you have the fraternities come together and they accuse him of hazing, yet he was not the only one, but he was the only one that they expelled. So they came to us, and I went down to Georgia State, and they sent 2 PhD African-American women in, and they were saying, oh, this will teach him a lesson for life. And I hit the ceiling. They said, well, we understand you, but we can't do anything. I said, well, who can? They said, the dean of students. I said, where is he? And they said, yes, you tell him I want to see him. And I went in and talked with him and said, now, we can make this real nice, or we can make it pretty ugly. That young man needs to graduate. I said, if he's done something wrong, punish him, but he needs this degree. And when I got through with him, they reinstated him. He graduated this June and wrote a great big letter of thank you. He said, had it not been for you in the NAACP, I would not have ever gotten my degree. So we're doing the grassroots things that people never hear about. But then of course last year I started the brouhaha when I said, back off Michael Vick, let him have his day in court. And I was attacked across the country, but it's done so much for me there in Atlanta and across the country where I see people who recognize, they come and say, we want to say thank you for standing up for Vick. So we're doing a lot of stuff.
Well, y'all, I told you Shanan was on construction site. He's been doing construction work today, and here he is in his lovely home in South Fulton, sitting at his lovely desk in South Fulton. Hey, Shanan.
Man, sitting at a busy junkie desk with books all around me.
Shanan, it's always a pleasure when we come together to just kind of share insight on various things. And we just had, we're in Black History Month. And Shanan, we've lost this month, during Black History Month, a lot of real powerful, influential people in the Atlanta area. We've lost Bunny, Jackson Ramson. We've lost Brother Samuels, the husband of Rita Samuel, SLC. And we lost the Reverend James Morton. Passed. James Morton passed, and then Thomas Deutsch. Thomas Deutsch of the 100 Black Men. And, of course, now the Reverend R.L. White Jr.
Mm.
And we wanted to do this special tribute to talk about Reverend White today, as he was the founding pastor of Mount Ephraim Baptist Church. I remember going to Reverend White Church when he was at Fox and Payne, when I was just starting my ministry some 42 years ago. And the advice that he shared with me as a young pastor getting started. And I really appreciate him. I met him when I was 22 years old at Trust Street Baptist Church when he preached for the Reverend J.E. Butler. I was just getting really started in the ministry at that time, just had received my calling and had been licensed in the ministry then. But Reverend White was a humble man. He was a man of a vision, a man of purpose. And we see, and many people ask the question when he was elected the president of the Atlanta chapter of NAACP, which he was not in civil rights and had been in civil rights. Nobody had known him for doing anything in civil rights. How did he get to be the president of the Atlanta chapter of the NAACP? And I think he just clearly talked about what we didn't know that he was capable of doing, because we saw him just as a black preacher. A revivalist, an evangelist, a recording artist, singer, preacher. That's what we saw him as. We didn't see him as a civil rights leader. So,
yeah.
But here we see today that some of the great work that he's done. And I'm going to stop here and let you just kind of elaborate on some of the things that you know about Reverend White.
Well, upon my return back to Atlanta from Northeastern, from Boston, studying undergrad, coming back here to work with a couple of ministries in the city, New Birth, and then historic Ebenezer. I had a great deal of connection with Reverend White and his beloved now widow, Lorraine Johnson White. Just humble, serious about the gospel, serious about ministry, serious about the work of Christ, and making sure that the Lord gets the glory, and just putting his body in the struggle. No, he was not known as a civil rights leader, but you can't pass a square inch of Black America, and we're not talking about the issues and the concerns of what's happening. And so, he stepped out on his concern and took on the presidency and did a fine job as president of the Atlanta chapter. And just a brother beloved, and just the domino effect of what has transitioned in this Black History Month in Atlanta. And it's like the Lord gives us a double whammy. It's like, John Lewis and C.T. Vivian leaving on the same day. Who would have thought about that? And then who would have thought that we would lose, all of a crescendo that deals. Or let me put it another way. Like when I said a domino effect of Bunny Jackson Ransom. Before that, Stanley Samuels. The quiet power behind Rita Samuels. But a businessman who built and did great work. Historic Ebenezer did, and the Horizon Sanctuary, and the parking lot of, the property that went on to that Martin Luther King Senior Resource Complex. Stanley Samuels, and several other, Stanley Love Stanley, and several other Black organizations coming together to build that. And then, to go from that to Bunny Jackson Ransom, first African American First Lady of the city of Atlanta. And then that domino effect continued to hit James Morton, who stood with his brother to found a largely a Black denomination, the Full Gospel Baptist Church Fellowship. Awesome. And James Morton was no slouch in the pulpit at all. I mean, he
not at all.
My Lord. And then from there, as you said, Tommy George um, national president of the 100 Black Men, uh, former state director in the late 70s, early 80s, to Senator Sam Nunn, the first African American to hold that seat. Powerful, powerful seat. And to go on to be a great businessman, and the chairman of the board of trustees at historic, I believe, not historic, but at Newburgh Missionary Baptist Church with Eddie Long, and now with Jamal Harrison Bryant. And then we get to Reverend White, and so it's been really tough. Our prayer was certainly with Sister First Lady Lorraine and the Mount Ephraim Church family, and a mighty oak tree has fallen straight down from Marietta down Auburn Avenue.
Well, I would say this as I recall and reflect on Reverend White, my years at WYZE Radio, where I was a radio announcer for many years, so I got the title Greg Fann, the Preacher Man, by the late Esmond Patterson Jr., Esmond Patterson, period. I don't know if Esmond was a junior or not, but Esmond Patterson, we know the gospel giant at that time, dubbed me Greg Fann, the Preacher Man. And so, if Esmond dubbed your title, that was your title. That was going to be it. It was going to call you that, But anyway, Reverend White would come on WYZE with Mount Ephraim, with the Mount Ephraim Hour, and just full of, you just wanted to hug him. The last time I saw Reverend White was we were at Morehouse College, and it was when Senator Warnock at that time was running for senator, and a group of preachers were there, and I hugged him, and he hugged me affectionately, as men do hug, and I wanted to say something there, and he was wanting to say something, and he yielded the floor to me that I could say what I needed to say before he said what he needed to say in that meeting. But that was the kind of person that he was. He was not a person that was, notarized, just thinking he's got to be seen, he's got to be known that he's here. His mere presence being there, people recognize greatness, recognize who he was. The man, the character of the man, the spirit of the man, and the love of the man. He's going to be missed by the members of Mount Ephraim, and many, many people are going to miss Reverend White across this nation, because he was a great preacher, a great spirit, and a beloved brother. And that's all I really can say is that I know that I'm going to miss being him, seeing him, and hearing his voice. We'll be listening to old tapes of his sermons, old tapes of his songs, recordings. And Lorraine, we certainly send our condolences and sympathy out to you, his wife, who has stood beside him. And behind every good man is a good woman. And she's been a good woman behind her good man. And I just thank her and we pray for her strength during these times of sadness and sorrow. This is Black history in the making. And for young preachers, because I'm, Shanan younger than I am, for young preachers, it's imperative for you to get with older preachers like Shanan, with me, and others, with Reverend Durley and Tim McDonald and others who've been out here on the battlefield, who've been doing the work that's been out here. It's imperative that you get with us before it's our time to depart, so we can impart some wisdom in you as terms of how things were and how things happen and how things change. Because Atlanta, as we see it now, is totally changing. The people that are dying now are the old Atlanteans who made Atlanta what it is today, helped shape it, helped form it to be what it is today, to make everybody now want to come to Atlanta. But we thank you, Lorraine. We thank you, the members of Mount Ephraim, for sharing your pastor and your husband with us.
Amen. Amen.
And as we get ready to close out today, Shanan, go on. You want to say something? I'm sorry.
No,
you're there at your office, so I can't really know when you're ready to respond. So when you sit beside me, I can tell. So and you might have to do like they do in the church. Hold up your finger.
was just going to say, I was just going to grab what you just said in terms of, making of Atlanta and all these people want to come to Atlanta. I wish they wouldn't, because the traffic is just terrible.
It's terrible, isn't it? Terrible. It's terrible. Can we send them back?
Please go back. Bishop, at some point, we do need to talk about all of these corporations that have moved in and are buying up. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution is doing an expose on it right now. These corporations that are buying up houses in the largely in the African-American community, forcing black families into a rental status, which really goes in and guts the wealth building avenue that many families, not just African American, but especially African American, in terms of our homes being an asset that helps us to be able to build an economic fabric and foundation for our family. They're not doing it on the other side of town, but they're coming in and literally buying up these homes, and folks are struggling to pay $1,800 to $2,000 a month to rent. And then the homeowners that live in those communities, because the renters are not really invested in the community or taking care of the property, homeowners are leaving out. And so it's creating in South Fulton and Southwest Atlanta and DeKalb County, and wherever we are, Clayton County, it's like ground zero. They're coming in and doing it. And then making people really live in substandard houses. Something go wrong in these homes, you can't find the corporations that own them to be able to deal with what's happening. That forces the renter to fix a property, further eroding their financial base. So, something maybe we need to talk about and get some folks on Straight Talk to really deal with this. The mayor will be at Concerned Black Clergy Monday after next, and we'll talk about that next week, and perhaps I'm sure rent control and the housing crisis in the city is going to be something that the African American community in the city is going to be something that we need to discuss with the mayor and his leadership and mayors throughout the metro area.
Well, you're absolutely right, and that's something we need to address, because it's actually really happening. Because when I go back to the west side and I go back out Old Bankhead Highway, and I see the development and houses and everything is going up, even in front of my church. They want to build 46 unit in front of the church there on Metropolitan with no parking lot. And on Metropolitan, you coming up that hill, and you people moving in and people moving out, where they're going to park and how they're going to move in and how they're going to move out. That's going to be a problem, a real problem. There's enough traffic already going up and down Metropolitan. But that's a conversation for another day. But I do want to make this announcement, Shanan, is that Reverend White's funeral, for those of you who would love to attend his funeral, it will be next Saturday, February 25th at 11 a.m. and it's going to be held at Mount Ephraim Church. So let's go show our condolences, our respect to our beloved brother. I'm sure there'll be plenty of people there from the clergy, the faith community, to be there to send him home. And thank God, and God bless his soul. Such a wonderful man again, and a wonderful spirit. Well, until next week, you've been in tune to nothing but Straight Talk with yours to the great Fann, the Preacher Man, and Shanan E. Jones, from the home of Shanan E. Jones and the studios of Straight Talk. We want to wish you and yours a happy and blessed week. And don't forget, you have been tuned to nothing but what? Straight Talk.
Email Greg Fann at FANN922 at Comcast.net or call 404-308-0795. Join us again for another episode of Straight Talk with Shanan Jones and Greg Fann, the Preacher Man.